welcome to the CMO Spotlight. And I'm here with Kevin Smith, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Rollins, Inc. Welcome, Kevin.
Welcome, Joe. How are you?
Great, thank you. So we're excited to have this conversation today with you, Kevin. I wondered, I know you've had a pretty amazing career, and with stints at Campbell's and the NFL and Marriott, Coca-Cola, but you've actually been at Rollins since 2002, I believe. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your career journey to Rollins and what you've been doing there since, and then also give us a little bit of explanation of the company and how it's structured, because I know there's several brands that are part of your purview there.
Sure. So most people would say I couldn't keep a job early in my career, but I promise you that wasn't the game plan. But I started right out of college in sales, as many people do, in packaged goods sales. My first territory was actually in the Bronx, New York. So they want to see if a kid who just spent the last 4 years in New Hampshire could survive in the jungle of New York, and apparently okay. And because of that, it led me to a marketing role at company headquarters. So I made that transition from sales to marketing pretty early and thought I was done with sales. At one point, I had an opportunity. We were actually negotiating with the NFL during the strike season because we felt we didn't get our full value of a program. So I went up with one of the brand managers who, when he got in front of all these people, were so odd, he kind of chickened out. And I was probably, 24, 25 at the time. And I really didn't have a filter. So I negotiated pretty hard with them. About a month later, they asked me if I'd rather be on their side of the desk than our side of the desk. So that's how I got to the NFL. That's
great. That's great. Well, that's always a nice compliment when you're negotiating against somebody and they're like, we don't want to have to deal with him again. Let's get him on our team.
Yeah, I don't think it's because I had any special skills. I just was, young and vigorous, shall we say. So I spent a couple years with the NFL. I was on the road a ton. Great job if you're single. We had a new baby at home. And I ran into some folks back at Campbell's who said, I was talking to some other companies. They said, why don't you come back? And I didn't think you could do that, but I did. And that allowed me to build some real marketing skills and brand management. I had to catch up with all those who had an MBA, which I did not. And from there, I went to Marriott, spent a little time in the restaurant business, which was fascinating because I really learned a lot about advertising there because we were creating new campaigns every month. So that was a really important part of my career from an advertising perspective. And then Marriott decided they wanted to sell the restaurant business. So I did a brief stint with Courtyard and then went on to the Coca-Cola company, and which is great. So I kind of reset myself in Atlanta. We've been in Atlanta ever since 1990. We love Atlanta. And I did many different jobs there. I learned a very important lesson as I was asked to go back into sales. And I said, well, I know everything I need to know about sales. And I didn't know the Coca-Cola way, which is one of the things I've learned along the way. And it was actually one of those things that really helped me understand how to operate in just about any corporate environment, because we learned conceptual selling. And understanding conceptual selling, especially if you're on the service side of the business, is really important. And it's something I use every day. So I use those selling technologies that I learned at the Coca-Cola company probably every day in my job to help influence or understand a situation or just think about how we ought to approach something. So that was great. And
tell us just really quickly, Kevin, tell us what you mean by conceptual selling. How is that different from other types of selling?
So I think of a lot of it's more like solution. Let's call it solution selling, right?
Yeah.
So really understanding what the company needs to accomplish. And if you're not selling a specific good that has specific function to it, you're selling something that's a little more amorphous as you talk about conceptual selling. So it's a state of being or an outcome or something that you'd like as a customer. And it's our job in a conceptual sale to understand the questions you should ask, look across a a buying group and maybe even joint venture a solution together that takes advantage of the best of the things you do as an organization and marries those and maybe fills some gaps of that other organization.
Got it. That's great. That's great. So then what brought you out of Coca-Cola and over to Orkin? Or to Rollins?
Yeah, probably a couple different things. I thought the company had changed quite a bit when Roberto Goizueta passed away and Don Keogh had retired. It just wasn't the same company I had joined. I was looking for something different. I was interested in what was happening in technology. So I actually joined a startup, and they worked in the online procurement space, funded by KKR, kind of a joint venture with Deloitte. And I got connected to somebody and started to do that. And as a result, it went okay. We actually got our burn rate down, but KKR decided they wanted to sell the company, and they sold it to a company based in Detroit. I did not want to move to Detroit. And during that time, I'd been approached a couple times by a recruiter to say, hey, we've got a great job. They wouldn't tell me what it was. And they finally let me know it was in pest control. And I wasn't really very excited about that, to tell you the truth. Wasn't something that I had done. But since it had red in the logo, and he convinced me it wouldn't hurt if I knew some people from the Rollins family, because they know everyone in town. So even if you have you'd just be interested in meeting these people. So I did, and I thought I'd do it for a couple of years till our youngest daughter finished high school, and lo and behold, I've been here 19 years.
Wow. So that's a fantastic journey, and you've been serving as chief marketing officer for several years now, many years. Yeah. So I'm curious if you could just give us a little bit of what is Rollins. You mentioned pest control as the primary business, but are there sub brands? What is in your purview as CMO? And tell us a little bit about the organization.
Sure. So we're a global operator operating in more than 700 companies, operating brands and franchises. We're wholly owned in most of the US. We do have some US franchises, wholly owned in Australia, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. And pretty much franchised I should have said Canada. Forgot about Canada for a second. So then you've heard of Orkin, which is our largest brand. Most people have heard of Orkin, our largest brand. But we own a company called Home Team, which is big in the new construction business. We own a couple of wildlife companies, True Tech and Critter Control, which are adjacent to pest control, and although they sometimes crash. We own Northwest here in the north southeast area, Western Waltham. So a number of different companies, Clark out on the West Coast. So pretty big group of companies that part of my job is to provide guidance and direction to those brands.
Mm-hmm. And each of those brands, I'm assuming, has sort of different mission in terms of, and different, obviously different branding, for example. So for the customer, they may not know that Northwest Exterminators is part of Rollins, or they may, but
we sort of hope they don't.
Yeah.
So the reason we started acquiring these companies is it's, a service business, it's pretty hard to grow. And the hardest thing to grow is your capability. So buying a company that is successful in its own right, has some good leadership and management talent, it is a real benefit. So we look for companies that are well run, have great talent on them, and do a pretty good job of creating a level of differentiation in the market with their brands.
Right. And I assume some of those brands that you just mentioned were ones that came through acquisitions that they were, it sounds like they were already running fairly successful businesses, but you all as a company felt that you could maybe bring them to the next level or help them level up in some way.
Yeah, so there should be some efficiency. So obviously there's a lot of things that we do as a large company that benefit. So for example, fleet, or how we may buy real estate, or legal, or how we handle cyber. So there are a number of things that we can help those companies with, probably help them do it better and hopefully less expensively. Although in some things, it's more important to be right than cheap.
Right.
So we probably have some more requirements about being correct and how we manage those situations.
Yeah, I love that. So you've had a pretty amazing career journey in terms of you worked on some of the top brands in the world. I'm wondering if there was a piece of advice that you wish you'd gotten earlier in your career, or maybe a piece of advice you'd give somebody that was relatively new to their marketing career.
Yeah. So the first thing I would probably think about is learn the company you go to work for. So a lot of people, I knew how to do that. So for me, I said, I already know about sales. Well, no, I didn't really know about sales when I got to the Coca-Cola company. As a matter of fact, I didn't know much about it at all as I thought. I mean, I went to supermarkets and had enough guts to go up and talk to people and try to sell them something. That's not selling. I was selling my personality. So selling is much more complex than that. So being willing to learn about your new company, how they make money, you need to do that every time, and that's a really important aspect of the business. So learn as much as you can about your new company. I have a leadership thing that I wish someone had told me right away. Don't worry about the objectives. Get your team right. So first thing, once I started doing that, my life became easy because I looked for people on my team that were complementary to what I could do. I wanted them to have similar values, or at least understand where I was coming from, and setting expectations so they understood how they might be successful with me specifically. And then they would know what in turn what I expected of them. And so that was really important. And to this day, I really follow that principle, having my team, having the best people I can have on my team, and then trying to cascade that down so they have the best people on their team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the thing I love about that, actually, it reminds me a little bit of when investors invest in an entrepreneur. They may often invest in that entrepreneur knowing that the idea is a terrible idea and that this business is never going to make it. But I'm investing in the person because I know that person will figure that out and overcome those obstacles that exist in the current business model or whatever. Because I'm focused more on the person and their attributes than I am about the exact business they're in or something like that. It sounds sort of similar philosophy for you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think I probably learned that more being in a service industry than I did in the product side of the business. So that started with Marriott. It continued for much of my career at Coca-Cola, and it's certainly a centerpiece of what we need to do here every day. Right? It's all about the people.
I love it. So I believe that we all have a superpower that makes us special and unique and different than maybe our peers. So I'm curious what you feel your superpower is.
That's a great question. So I call it I have a compound power. And that compound power is really about building relationships and collaboration. So in many businesses, especially in a marketing role, you're often supporting an internal customer as well as trying to sell to an external customer or market to an external customer. In our business, we have 15,000 people out there, technicians every day that are delivering our brands to our customers. And if I don't understand their job, if I don't understand who the people they're working for, what a service manager does, what a branch manager does, what a region manager does, what a division president does, and have spent time riding around in a truck, in a branch, crawling under a house, looking for termites.
Right.
If I don't have that knowledge and haven't spent that time and haven't built a relationship with those folks, we're not going to be successful when we try to understand something that we think is important from a marketing perspective, and we want to try to get the entire organization to adopt that. So having those relationships in place, collaborating with those teams, and understanding what they're all about has been absolutely invaluable to me. And it's probably how I get things done.
I love it. So as we're talking now in late 2021, we're hopefully leaving a global pandemic. I'm curious, other than just the pandemic and the challenges of work through it, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing, either in, in your business or as a marketer?
So probably two things. The first one I think everyone is dealing with is just how do we attract talent? It's a really tough market right now.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to find talented technicians, even for us, which, are the backbone of our business. I've lost some great people. I never thought I would train people for Amazon and Square and Adobe, but those are three companies we've just lost people to recently. And so I didn't know you worked in the pest control industry to go work for some of those great brands and companies. So that'll tell you a little something about the labor market, although we're a little proud of that as well, because it's a selling point for us down the road. So that side of the business. And I would say also, as we try to navigate, how we're going to come back to a workspace, if we do, how is that going to be different? What does that look like? So that's a really big challenge, because as leaders, we have to learn how to do something different. And an example, I think everybody's probably changed something. One of the things we used to do was Friday afternoon problem solves, and we'd do them right after lunch, like 1 o'clock, maybe 1:30, and we'd spend an hour. If somebody had an issue, we'd go gather. We have a gathering space, and we'd all sit around this gathering space and have lots of spontaneous conversation and kick some stuff around. And mostly, it wasn't so much that we wanted to solve the problem. Is a way for us to all think together, learn from each other, maybe make some of us around us a little better or more knowledgeable than they were when we started. Those are really hard to do online.
Yeah.
Almost impossible. So learning how to do those things that we used to do in person. I'm big on the Bill Marriott philosophy of manage by walking around. We had to change how we do that. And I do quarterly updates with people, little 25-minute meetings. Tell me what you're working on. How's it doing? Did it get out the door? What's next? And what do you think you would do again if you had it over? Whatever questions those are. But those are the things that we miss when we can't just, walk around the corner and say hello to someone.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So I guess I'll make this into a two-part question. Where did you find inspiration for your team, maybe pre-pandemic? And then where do you find inspiration now that we're, hopefully on the tail end of pandemic living?
So I find that people often find inspiration from each other. And one of the things that I had never done, I shouldn't say that. I was very laissez-faire about meeting with my team on a regular basis. It's pre-pandemic. It was once a quarter, I'll talk about the company results to everybody, or maybe talk about a planning thing. I would gather our people once a year with our agency partners for an event we called Camp K. And so those things kind of happened by routine. When the pandemic came and we sent everyone home, oh boy, now what do you do?
Yeah.
So we started doing, borrowed a little technology plan, doing stand-ups every day. And we got a routine around stand-ups and talking to people and just having that energy and interaction with everyone until we wore ourselves out. So we went from daily to twice a week to once a week to twice a month to once a month till we got back into the office. And we're in hybrid mode right now. And we've half of our teams come in 2 days a week, half of our teams come in 3 days a week. We flip-flop it. So no one has to commute in the same week on a Monday and a Friday. So that's worked out really well. But I almost miss the stand-up meetings, which are now really hard to do. If part of the team is in the office and part of the team is on video. And we've tried a couple of those. I think that's the hardest meeting to conduct, is when some, not all, are with you or not with you.
Yeah, to your point, it's easier to do that meeting with everybody remote or everybody in person, but the mix is the tough part.
Sure. So, so that was so what I found in that is people feed off of each other. And when they hear about, we'd do the same thing, what's new in your life? What's the best thing that happened to you last week? just little questions you may have asked your children when they got home from school.
Right.
People want to talk about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll hear about, well, if there's something you need some help with, talk to us, or something that's bothering you. That worked really well. And people drew from that and helped each other. And all we had to do as leaders were to facilitate those conversations. And I think everybody responded to that really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a big help for us, post-pandemic. It's not like you can create that energy easily. And so you need to figure out ways. We'd add a little music in, we do photos. I did a thing, let me see that. Oh, I have them right here. So we did this. This is kind of an interesting thing, but these are play cards.
Yes.
So I did one for every individual, and on the back, it's kind of like a baseball card. It has a bunch of questions, where you're from, hometown, especially as we added new people, they could have the list of people to see what they were all about. So
that's great. Yeah. And how are those do you distribute those a copy to everybody in the team, or how does that work?
Everybody in the team gets it.
Nice.
We've added a few people. So we're adding new cards and sending the cards out and handing those new people a set of cards when they walk in the door.
Do they get to update their stats if they improve their batting average or something like that?
So we haven't made it that performance oriented yet. I might leave that off for a little while, but
right.
It would be a nice competition, completing 6 out of 7 objectives on time last year.
Right. I love it. Well, you brought up a little bit here, leadership, and I'm curious, what are the values that either you want to demonstrate as a leader, or what values do you demand in the people that you're looking for to lead on your team?
So I would say, from a leadership, you got to live your own values. So it starts there. Live the values, get your team wrapped around a mission. Every day when our team gets up, they own delivery of a sales plan. So even though they are only partially responsible for it, every day they've got to make sure that their team is close to achieving that sales plan, because that's the only way they're going to meet their revenue plan. So having that as a core outcome, I think really helps. So the first thing is, all right, what do we need to accomplish? We have a series of things that make sense, but I'd start with that vision. The second thing I would start with is always believe there's a way to do something. So don't, and I think that really helped us during the pandemic. So instead of, oh, I can't get this done, I can't talk to someone, and having all those excuses, believe there's a way. And so everyone just figured it out. And you really got to be proud of a team that can just go out and figure out another way to get something done when it's hard to meet or whatever that happens to be. We launched a service offering in 19 days, specifically with the pandemic, called Vital Clean, because early on, everyone thought we had to clean surfaces.
Right.
And we went and cleaned surfaces, and it was a total effort. It wasn't just a marketing effort. It was we had to get our technical services teams involved, our sales teams involved, our operating teams involved. And everyone is totally dispersed, and nothing is easy to do. But we believed we could get it done. We found product. We got it out the door. We'd never done anything that quickly before. And so I think that understanding what we wanted to accomplish, how we wanted to get it out the door, and believing that we could do it was really important to us.
I love that.
The last one I'll really focus on, I have a list of them, but the last one I will focus on is make the people around you better. And I want us to help each other. We get better learning from each other. And one of my most gratifying moments was when we were early starting coming back to the office. I never left, which is a long story, but I'd start seeing these little conversations, and we had a woman who just joined us to work on the commercial team, on a B2B team. And one of the other people on her team, probably a couple mornings of the week, was walking her through the business and teaching her about the business. And that was like, oh my God, Patrick, that is exactly what I want to have happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for helping Miriam get connected to the business and engaged and matriculated and sharing your knowledge, that's exactly what we want to do. So somehow, even someone who'd only been around for a couple of years had learned that from other meetings he had and how people had helped him.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that's part of that is fostering a culture of mentorship, so that your team is not relying on you solely as the person that can guide them, but being able to guide each other and help each other grow.
Well, they'd be in a lot of trouble if they relied solely on me.
Right. Okay, so I want to shift gears for a minute. At setup, we're marketing matchmakers, and that often means we connect brands and marketing agencies together and that kind of thing. So we sort of live in that space between, we're not a marketing agency, we're not on the client side, we sort of live in that space in between. So I know you've worked with a lot of agencies over the years, both in your previous stops and now here at Rollins. So I'm curious, just generally, how you work with marketing agencies.
So probably two things. So the first thing is to understand the core principle is that we believe our agency partners are part of our team. So I don't want to have a vendor relationship. And it's a little selfish because I want more than my fair share of their time, attention, and thought. And the more they know about our business, the more successful they're going to be. And so we keep them, we have integration meetings with all our agency partners to touch a business once a month and what's happened. And they've been as frequent as weekly, if need be. So depending on where we are and something. So I think, first and foremost, it's having them as a part of our team. I mentioned we did this thing, it's called Camp Killabugamunga, but Camp K for short.
I wonder what Camp K stood for. Now I know, Camp Killabugamunga.
Yeah, and our AOR, the Richards Group, came up with that name after attending one of our before we had a Camp K event. I don't even know if we had a good name for it. So they branded that very quickly for us, which was great, and demonstrated their value right out of the gate. But what we typically do is do it prior to planning season. And it's a chance for us to learn something about each other, connect on culture, and hopefully maybe plan a little bit for the upcoming year. So that's been a great meeting. We get off site, we go do it somewhere. I bring in a division president or another executive. It's the executive in residence program. So they talk to us about what's important to them. And typically they get something very specific for their area or geography because they've showed up and they said, okay, what have you always wanted to test? All right, we'll go build that for you. And either assign someone from your team that we can work with, or we'll work with you directly. And most of them have wanted to work with us directly, and they love the energy that they get, and that's a great thing. And so that's been a really good place for us. But it's I guess it's just an example of how we want to work with our agency partners.
Yep. So I think most brands, particularly larger companies like Rollins, have an ecosystem of agencies. You mentioned both. I'm just curious, your philosophy, do you lean more heavily on a agency of record to do most of the work for you and then some specialists here and there, or do you have a group of specialists, or how do you think of your ecosystem of agencies?
So we think about specific expertise. My sense is, so when I got here, I think we were working with two agencies. And as we looked at capability and competency and got a little smarter about what we needed to deliver and what we did, we found there were other places that we could look for very specific things. So we wanted certain things from certain people. So we typically have, especially in today's day of performance marketing, so we have what I call a performance media based agency now, as opposed to just a media agency.
Right.
And somebody who's looking across our entire network to understand, how does that make sense? Obviously have an AOR who helps us branding and, make sure that we're on point with brand strategy and communication, that sort of thing. We work with a public relations agency. We work with SEO. We think that's a very specific skill. a lot of different technology shops. So we build applications, iOS applications for our salespeople so they can sell off an iPad. We talked about websites. So we're constantly doing work on websites. So we need help with that. On the B2B side, we're really changing and upgrading how we work with our sales teams and how we engage with our customers, and have done a number of different implementations. We need somebody who can help us implement technology solutions. So we have somebody in that camp. So any given time, we used to have a yellow page agency back in the day. So
yeah, right.
Not
anymore.
Not anymore. At any given time, we're probably 7, 8 different shops just for the Orkin brand. I will tell you that our smaller brands are more likely to work with 1, maybe 2 agencies. It just makes sense for them. But at 1.4 billion roughly, there's a lot of complexity.
Yeah. So I'm curious if there's certain disciplines of marketing that you would always outsource to an agency because you feel you need that external perspective, or are there certain functions or disciplines that you would never outsource to an agency because you feel you need to really own them in-house?
So I would never outsource brand strategy. So I believe we own the strategy. I would love to have someone push us on it, comment, help us understand it, help us get to the end. But at the end of the day, I want us to own that and define that. Typically, the way I like to think about it is, where do we create competitive advantage? If there's something where we create competitive advantage, I want us to do that in-house. If there's something that we can do that somebody's a lot smarter than we are in a particular area, we're going to outsource that. We've outsourced most of the social work that we do, social media work that we do. We outsource SEO, and we've gone through some fits and starts with that. Really happy with our partner right now, but it took us a while to get to that. And part of it was, I don't think we had the right expertise in-house to make a good decision. So I'll tell you how complex that is. We do all of our paid search work, and just recently bought all our digital aggregators in-house. And what we have found is, we think we're more attentive. We do a better job than that, but that's really dependent on, can you remain staffed in that area and keep really talented people working on that? But we like that in-house. We believe it's created a significant area of advantage for us in our category.
So I'm going to shift gears away from agency for a minute. As marketers, we often struggle with demonstrating the value of marketing. We're sometimes looked at as cost center versus a value driver. So how do you show the value of marketing to the non-marketing members of the C team, the rest of the C-suite and the rest of the organization that's not necessarily marketing focused?
So now you hit my sweet spot. So it's called measure. So when I joined the company, I asked, I said, so if I'm to succeed, what do you want to have happen? And they said, we just need more leads.
Right.
And so I said to them, well, anyone can get you more leads. I can get you as many leads as you want.
Right.
Do you want qualified leads? And they were like, what do you mean qualified leads? Well, somebody who might actually buy. I can get somebody to call you on the phone all day. Right. But what we really want is somebody who will buy and then do something different. So we've been on a journey, for 19 years of trying to measure things. We actually got pretty good at measuring yellow pages first by tracking phone calls. And we gave individual phone calls, and we were able to do that. Once the digital age started, now we can get really good. Yeah. So we started, we created our own metrics for a while. We had cost per lead sold and started, which became our ultimate metric, because if we don't collect money, then there really wasn't any value. And that helped us understand where to invest. So as the company grew, it became much easier for us. We never have a challenge getting a marketing budget every year, because we sit down and we say, how would you like to grow the business? What's the revenue goal for this year? How much recurring revenue you're going to have at the end of the year? how many customers you're going to lose. That gap is our sales plan. Okay, here's what it costs per lead sold and started for us to get a customer. We judge you're going to need X amount of customers. That's what my marketing budget needs to be this year.
I love it. So I'm curious if there's a particular program or campaign that you ran that taught you a great deal, either because it was a huge success or because it was a huge flop and you learned a lot from that and you needed to learn that valuable lesson from it.
So it seems to me I always learn more from our failures, but I suspect
Yeah.
a lot of us do. I have a very funny story, which is more advertising, but I'm going to tell you a sales story. If we have time, I'll get to that one.
Yeah.
So when I got here initially, I probably viewed my first job was sales and marketing until I was named the CMO in, I don't know, 07 or whatever. So I was focused on both sides of the house.
Right.
And none of our business was growing particularly fast. The business was probably had revenue of 625 million. We'll be 2.4 billion this year, roughly. So, and for a variety of reasons, we weren't growing very quickly, and our commercial business really wasn't growing at all. I looked at it and I said, well, here's the problem. The problem is you have salespeople reporting to operators who don't have sales experience. Mm-hmm. So how can you expect to get some value? So being a relationship builder, I went out, I found an open ear on the West Coast to one of the division presidents who ultimately mentored me quite a bit. And I talked to him about my idea. He says, I'll try it. That's worth trying. So we put a vertical sales organization in that did not report into the operations. And we figured out how to do it. And I think ultimately we were spending less money in sales. So we had a great plan, how to find the right kind of people, went through a really good discipline process to get this launched. What I wasn't counting on was the cultural backlash from those branch managers who ran salespeople's and thought it was part of what they did. And we took it away from them. And they literally put up signs in the door, no salespeople allowed. So that exact relationship that I wanted to occur between the branch manager and the salesperson was falling apart. And it was a big issue. And to the credit of this division president, we worked on trying to fix that. We had meetings, spent a lot of time with these guys. And unfortunately, part of our culture is if we ignore something from the home office long enough, it might actually go away. So we fought this for quite a while. We actually rolled it out into some other geography because we saw a similar thing happening a few years later when we acquired another company in the Northeast, and they had a vertical selling organization. The good news was we accelerated our sales revenue for a while. The bad news was this was not the way for us to execute long-term, and we really needed our operators connected to our sales team. So I learned a very important lesson. It's all about the culture of the organization, and never forget about the culture of the organization.
So then how were you able to change that? Obviously you had to mend those fences and build bridges with those sales folks. How do you change an organization's culture if that's part of your DNA?
That's a huge question, right?
Yeah.
I think we're still working on that question. But I think part of it is you need to help those teams become more successful. And one of the things we did for the commercial teams was our residential guys were doing a great job of taking pictures and using their iPads to show the customer what work we're doing. We built an app for them. When we went to do it for the commercial team, we sat down with those teams. Okay, so where are the pain points? Where do you have issues? What do you have to fix? It's too much paperwork. Contracts are too complicated, and it's hard to do pricing. So we went to those sales teams, came back, fixed all those things, and then they used this tool. So what I would say is you better go figure out what someone else needed. I'd forgotten the cardinal rule of selling, which is where are all those personal wins?
Yeah.
And could we create personal wins? So I think after falling on our face a little bit, we got back to basics and understood, hey, we've got an internal customer here that needs some help. we could help them be successful. And we're really not doing that. And Nate, in our own eagerness to try to fix another problem, we forgot about the people that we also needed to help.
Yeah, well, I think that's a prime sales management thing is how do we arm and equip sales with the right tools and things that they need to be successful, but also how do we remove barriers for them? Removing barriers is big for salespeople to help them facilitate an easier conversation with a potential client. And so
Sure.
it sounds like that's what you focused on was arming and equipping them and removing barriers, and then that ingratiated you to them to stop having kind of a perception of them at corporate versus us out in the field kind of thing.
Yeah, and we've continued to do that. So, how do we help them? So if I think about, most B2B selling organizations are probably creating 80% of their opportunity themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the marketing organizations are doing a lot of sales enablement, and to try to create a more lead-based or get them in front of their best prospects. So that's kind of like the next iteration. How do we help them make more money? Well, we put a better quality of customer in front of them. And I think staying focused on how we help them, what tools they need, how we enable them to be more successful has been a big part of that continued shift, because you're never done.
Love it. All right. So I'm going to wrap things up with some questions for fun, just completely fun questions. The first is there a band or a movie or a book or a quote that really inspires you?
Yeah, there is. And it sort of came to the during the pandemic. So my wife is a voracious reader and listener of podcasts, all things. And she was listening to a podcast about Keith Urban. And he was talking about being on a set, and, boy, it was complicated. Had to move everybody around. And boy, we're staying in this 5-star hotel and all these things. And he said, but what I learned is there's no whining on the yacht.
I love that. Right.
So whenever we're, about to complain about something, it's, hey, there's no whining on the yacht.
By the way, the yacht can be whatever you want to call the yacht. It doesn't have to be the yacht.
It doesn't.
No whining.
Does not have
no
to
whining
be the
in
yacht.
The car on the drive. No whine. Right.
Sure. You could be on the beach and it's a little windy. Hey, no whining on the yacht.
I love that. So we're going to give Keith Urban credit for this quote that inspires you. I love it.
Little does he know, and this has been around. So our entire friend group uses this. Our Facebook group, it's kind of making the rounds.
No whining on the yacht. Love it. So outside of family, I'm curious, where do you find joy outside of work? Or do you have a hobby or something that you love to do?
I have tons of hobbies. I'm a time spent guy, so I love spending time with friends. One of the way I get to do that is playing golf. I love to play, can't play enough. So that's something. I'm a guitar player, so I love doing that. I love to ski. I love to boat. I play a lot of
outdoor activities mostly, it sounds like.
Yeah, I like doing things outside. Anything I can do outside is a good day.
Great. I'm curious if there's a brand that you've never worked on that really you admire most, and what about that brand do you admire?
Wow. So I like brands that I use. So I feel that if I can have a relationship with a brand, it's likely I'm going to admire that brand. And so one of the brands I really admire is Sonos. So they've done a great job of solving a problem for me. So in many, I've bought stereo equipment since I've been in college. And the good news is they've compacted some of that, which is a real advantage if you ever had those speakers that were
of course
half a human size, these big amplifiers. And so what they do is two things. I'm spending a lot less money on equipment as I've moved. We're on like house 12 or 13. And if you leave wire embedded in all these homes, you're spending a lot of money. Sonos solves that problem, but they also solved the most important problem because all those systems were really complicated. And I just wanted to come home and have music in the house when I got home, but it was always too complicated for my wife. And what Sonos did was make it easier for her to operate something on her iPad or phone. And now she has music on all the time, doesn't leave it up to me to be the DJ.
Right.
It integrates with Spotify and Pandora and Apple Music. So everything else you want to use, which is fantastic. You can get portable speakers. You can add to an existing system. Fantastic brand, solving lots of problems.
I love that. I agree. I mean, I think that music has become democratized by the technology, and by the fact that we don't have to own music, that we can stream it, changes the way we consume music. But that's a key tool. Sonos provides a key tool that to your point, makes it simple and easy. And also, by the way, great quality too. I mean, the sound is really good. It's not just junky speakers. They're really great sounding speakers too.
Yeah, and they've sorted out that some people might be hardwired in a couple things, and you can hardwire into and have half Wi-Fi, half. I mean, they really thought about the problems they needed to solve and continue to solve.
Yep. I love it. Okay, so I guess my last question, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate the time we've shared together. I'm curious if there's anything else that you wish that I had asked as part of this conversation, or maybe that I should ask for future conversations.
Ooh, so I got, usually the question I often get asked is, why have you been in this role so long?
Yeah.
So, for me, I've been in this role for 14 years. I've been with this company for 19.
Wow.
So that's a question I often get. And
so what is your answer? What has kept it interesting, fresh, exciting for you over 14/19 years?
Yeah. So I'm hoping that people, you take away that it's not about the success you have, but the success your organization has. So we've been very fortunate to grow up in this shift in marketing as you've added the digital age. And if you address that and embraced it, I think that really helped. So one of the things that I find fantastic about my organization is there hasn't been anything that we really wanted to do as a marketing team that we were unable to do. Mm-hmm. So now I will tell you that Mr. Rollins is not always the easiest person to convince. And you better have some tenacity, because you might take 3 or 4 trips to the plate to get something approved. But there hasn't been anything that we've wanted to do. The first website, initially I wanted to change a website. They had a website up. It was a brochure. It was done in China for about 45 grand and looked at, and it just wasn't representative of the brand. And I had to ask him for $250,000. And you thought I was asking for one of his children.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I won't even tell you what we're spending on the latest iteration.
Right.
But once you earn that trust, things move along pretty well. So I think that, being able to have a fair way to look at what we contribute as a marketing organization and being able to do that just has made the journey really fun. And then the idea that we've been acquiring companies and we have to figure out how to matriculate them into the organization and what the value they bring and meeting their leadership teams. And that's just been, it's like you're almost coming to a new company, not every day, but it just creates a lot of interest. So for me, the time flew. It just went really quickly. And it's really been I think I trained for this job. I think everything I did prior to this was training for this role.
Well, and what I'm also hearing is that you've been stimulated by the shifts in marketing, the shifts in consumer behavior, the shifts in the business over the years. have been stimulating as you watch transformations from, the old way of doing marketing where, you do a couple TV spots and a couple print ads and you're good to go, to now we're doing advanced CRM and, and marketing on a one-to-one basis versus, mass marketing as we were doing it today. But it sounds like that's kept you stimulated over the years as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect.
Well said. Better than I said it, but well said.
No, you said it. But Kevin Smith, Chief Marketing Officer for Rollins, I really appreciate this time together. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. I can't wait for people to hear it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.